Here is the part disciplined savers rarely see coming. Most people think the dream is to retire with a huge 400 and wonk or IRA. But here is the twist that many do not see coming. I have watched Morningstar publish several studies showing that if you enter retirement with $1 to $3 million in traditional tax deferred accounts, you may pay more in lifetime taxes than you did while you were working. Not because you did anything wrong. I will explain the math behind the spike and the practical moves that keep retirement income predictable. And certainly not because you did not save enough, but rather because the U.S. tax system is structured to penalize those who have large traditional account balances. And I know immediately some people might be thinking, most people do not have $1 million invested. Is not it only a small minority of people? Well, if we look at the general population, yes, but for disciplined and consistent savers it happens. I prefer decisions that research proves at Fidelity's Millionaire Outlook nearly 8 in 10 millionaires built their wealth through regular employer income and steady investing. This is literally the 400 wonk IRA path. These are the exact accounts we're talking about today. Ramsey Solution National Study of Millionaires found 93% of millionaires built their wealth in ordinary jobs, teachers, engineers, managers, healthcare, government, trades, and military. They did not have a big windfall. They did not inherit the money. When you hear the word deduction, it sounds like a gift. In reality, it is a delay, and delays come with conditions. I value anything that turns surprises into decisions. That is what a bucket strategy and a conversion plan can do. If you have a mix, you can choose whether the next dollar of spending is taxable or not. That is real freedom. They simply saved and invested over a long period of time. Wealth X Global Wealth Census, between 76 and 80% of U.S. millionaires built wealth through employment, disciplined saving, and investing, not entrepreneurship or inheritance. I prefer decisions that still look good 10 years from now. When RMDs begin, your account stops being purely an investment account. It becomes an income account on the IRS schedule. A balanced bucket approach is the financial version of diversification. You diversify not just investments, but also the tax treatment of future cash flow. So while 1 to 3 million may sound like a lot, the data is clear. Millions of everyday Americans will retire with 7-figure balances. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. If the only way you can pay your bills is by creating taxable income, you have limited options. Options expand when some of your spending can be funded without a tax event. And most of it will be inside tax-deferred accounts, which means they are the exact group that Morningstar is warning about. Today I am going to walk you through exactly how it happens. The best time to plan is when you still have options. Options shrink when you cross into mandatory withdrawal years. Who is most at risk and how you can fix it before RMDs show up like an unexpected tax bomb. Every rule in finance has a cost. Tax deferral has a cost, and the cost shows up when the deferral ends and the withdrawals are mandatory. If you are younger, the fix is easier because time is on your side. If you are older, the fix is still possible, but it requires deliberate use of the window years. I have watched Morningstar has been sounding the alarm on this for years. The whole Morningstar research team keeps showing the same thing. Retirees with $1 to $3 million in tax deferred accounts often pay the highest lifetime tax bills of any group of savers. It is not the ultra-wealthy. It is not the high-income executives. It is the consistent and disciplined savers who unintentionally build this tax problem. I care about incentives because incentives explain behavior. The reason the window years are valuable is that your paycheck is gone and RMDs have not begun. That gap is a rare chance to act on your own terms. I do not like being forced into decisions. The tax code forces decisions when your accounts are structured in only one way. A planning mistake is assuming your bracket is the full story. The bracket is a label, but the effective rate is the real outcome. I like strategies that reduce stress. A plan that smooths taxable income can reduce stress because it reduces the surprises that show up in April. Why? Because once you hit your early 70s, the IRS takes control of your withdrawal schedule. Up until that point, you can take as much or as little as you want from your 401k or your IRA. But once you reach RMD age, currently 73, and eventually increasing to 75, that freedom disappears. I prefer decisions that still look good 10 years from now. The saver who built wealth through steady work deserves a plan that preserves dignity. Dignity in retirement often means predictable after-tax income. RMDs, or required minimum distributions, are mandatory withdrawals. The IRS forces you to take out of your traditional retirement accounts every single year, whether you need the money or not. It is the government's way of saying, hey, you've delayed paying taxes for decades. Now it is time for us to start taking a share, and that percentage you must withdraw goes up every single year. Suddenly, even if you are frugal, even if you have other income sources, even if you do not want to take this money out, you are required to take out $10,000 or tens of thousands of dollars. And it all gets taxed as ordinary income. You no longer get to decide how much you withdraw. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. A Roth bucket gives you a steering wheel. You can spend without inflating taxable income. You can smooth the years where the code would otherwise punish you. If you have only pre-tax savings, every dollar you spend becomes a taxable event that is not flexible. The best retirement planning is done before retirement. The second best time is right after retirement, before the window closes. When you hear about someone paying more taxes in retirement, it sounds impossible. It becomes possible when one withdrawal causes additional taxable benefits and surcharges. Required minimum distributions make that decision for you, and this is where tax problems start. I have seen people do everything right for 40 years and still get surprised at the finish line. The surprise is not the market. The surprise is the schedule attached to tax, deferred accounts. And why Morningstar keeps warning us about it, let me give you a real Morningstar-style example. The tax tornado is a math problem, not a moral problem. When you understand the math, you stop blaming yourself and you start adjusting the plan. The mistake is treating retirement planning like a single account problem. It is a cash flow problem across multiple rules. A good plan does not require you to win every year. It requires you to avoid predictable, unforced errors. This is one of those predictable errors. When the government forces withdrawals, it can also force taxable events you would not choose in a calm year. Meet a couple entering retirement with $1.5 million in a traditional IRA. They're 65, they're modest spenders, and they plan to withdraw about 4% a year, roughly $60,000. They're thinking, perfect. We will take what we need, keep our taxes low. The reason Social Security taxation matters is not politics. It is the mechanics. More income can make more benefits taxable. And let the rest just stay invested and keep growing here. Is the problem even when they're withdrawing $60,000 a year? The portfolio keeps growing. And in many real Morningstar models, it grows to $1.8 or even $2 million or more by the age of 73. That means their very first RMD could easily be $75,000, $80,000, or even $90,000. Then add in Social Security on top, maybe another $50,000 combined, and suddenly they're pushed into higher tax brackets. 85% of their Social Security becomes taxable. They trigger IRMAA Medicare surcharges. Many people save aggressively and then ignore distribution planning. The distribution phase is where the tax code shows its teeth. When you recognize that $1 can be treated as more than $1 for tax purposes, you start to see why the effective rate can jump. The problem is not that one rule is unfair. The problem is that multiple rules can overlap in the same year and amplify each other. And their marginal tax rate can spike to 27.75% or even 46.25% because of the tax tornado. Again, if you understand the incentives, you can make better decisions. I have watched Morningstar keeps warning of these middle affluent retirees, those with balances in the $1 to $3 million range. They're hit hardest with lifetime taxes. Not because they're wealthy, not because they're overspending. When you see a tax bomb in advance, it stops being a bomb. It becomes a project with steps you can execute. That timing is what creates the worst outcome: high forced income plus phase-ins plus cliffs. A small Roth contribution early can look insignificant. Over decades, it can become the bucket that preserves your control later. Flexibility is not a luxury. It is a risk management tool, especially when healthcare costs and tax rules change, but because they're forced to recognize income they did not need or they did not want. And here is a part that a lot of people miss. I do not like surprises, and retirement should not be one long series of surprises. Planning is how you reduce surprises. In many households, Social Security and a traditional IRA are the two main levers. When one lever moves, it can move the other. RMDs start relatively modest, roughly 4%, but they increase every single year if you are only ever drawing the minimum amount. It is very likely that your portfolio is growing at a rate faster than what you are taking out. When you hear 1 to 3 million, you might picture luxury. In many cases, it is just decades of consistent saving and compounding. This is not a call to abandon traditional accounts. It is a call to avoid having only one kind of account, because one kind of account creates one kind of outcome. If you retire and delay Social Security, your taxable income can drop for a period. That period is valuable because it lets you act before the tax tornado forms. And that is exactly what Morningstar's modeling shows over and over again. These balances grow well into your 70s and your 80s. In your 90s, the RMDs get larger and larger. The tax income problem compounds. Every single year, what starts as a manageable RMD turns into a growing and accelerating tax problem. And it is often one that disciplined savers did not see coming until it is too late. I have always preferred simple systems and long time horizons. When withdrawals are optional, you can shape your income. When withdrawals are required, the tax code shapes your income, and that difference is not small. It is easy to ignore taxes when you are accumulating. Distribution is different. Distribution is where the code touches almost every decision you make. Let's simplify this because the tax torpedo is one of the most misunderstood parts of retirement planning. When you take money out of a traditional 401k or traditional IRA, that money is taxable. That is the obvious part. But here is the twist. Those withdrawals can also make more of your Social Security become taxable. So one extra dollar you take out doesn't just count as $1 of income, it can drag up to 85 cents of your Social Security into your taxable income at the same time. And this is where the tax tornado hits. There are two main danger zones. Morningstar talks about the 27.75% marginal tax zone for people who think they're in the 12% bracket. In this zone, each $1 of additional IRA withdrawal causes up to 50 cents of Social Security to become taxable. So you are being taxed on $1.50 of income for every dollar you withdraw. Here is what it looks like if your federal bracket is 12%. The phrase required minimum distribution is plain English. It means you no longer set the pace, you follow the pace, and you pay ordinary income tax as you go. Then you have to add in state tax or other phase-in effects, and the real marginal tax rate becomes about 27.75%. Yes, even though your bracket says 12%. If you are younger, the easiest fix is diversification across tax buckets, not just diversification across investments. Then we have the 46.25% marginal tax zone for people who think they're in the 22% bracket. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. Here is the bigger spike in this zone. Each $1 of IRA withdrawal or 401k withdrawal causes 85 cents of Social Security to be taxed. So you are taxed on $1.85 for every dollar you take out. Here is what it looks like for the 22% bracket. If your portfolio is still growing, that growth can feel like a win. But inside a traditional account, it can also enlarge the future tax base. If you build a Roth bucket, you are buying future flexibility. Flexibility has value even if you never use every option. In the middle zone, the code is sensitive. Small changes in withdrawals can create large changes in taxes. That sensitivity is what makes the tornado feel like a trap. Then you have to add in state tax IRMAA cliffs, credit phaseouts, and effectively you are at a marginal tax rate of about 46.25%. It is not because the bracket itself is high, it is that two taxes hit the same dollar at once. And this hit is the tax tornado. This is why. So many retirees say, why am I paying more in taxes now than when I had a paycheck? It is because the way Social Security is taxed. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. That saver deserves clarity, not a trap. The trap is solvable when you understand the rules early enough. That is why I keep coming back to the word control. In retirement, control is the difference between choice and obligation. And then you have your RMD, and this all makes for a perfect storm of hidden taxes. Most retirees do not intentionally end up in this situation. It is just that they were disciplined savers. The saver who is most exposed is often not the richest. It is the saver sitting in the phase, in zone, where every extra dollar triggers additional tax calculations. If you want stability, design for it. Stability comes from having more than one lever to pull. When conditions change, in my experience, the most painful taxes are the ones you did not plan for. A forced schedule removes your ability to adapt, and they saved into a tax-deferred account. This is the group Morningstar calls middle affluent A-shore traditional IRA or traditional 401 continues to grow, and you are only taking out the minimum your tax torpedo can grow right along with it. The most common failure is not lack of saving. It is lack of distribution planning, because most people never get taught that distribution is a different game. The research is a warning, but it is also an invitation. You can design your retirement income instead of discovering it. You do not need perfection. You need direction and consistency over many years. Compounding is powerful, but compounding inside a traditional account also compounds the future tax base. That is why where you compound can matter. I always ask a simple question: what can I control? You cannot control future tax law, but you can control how many different buckets you have to pull from. A traditional account feels like a private vault, but the rules make it a shared arrangement. The government simply waits, and then it collects on its timeline. Now that we've walked through what the tax tornado is and why it happens, let's also talk about who it actually hits. I care about incentives because incentives explain behavior. Compounding works best when you remove unnecessary friction. Because this part surprises a lot of people, most retirees assume that the tax torpedo is a wealthy retirement problem. I care about incentives because incentives explain behavior. A good plan is the one you can follow for decades without regret. If you fill lower brackets intentionally during that window, you can reduce the size of forced withdrawals later. When Medicare premiums jump at certain income points, it creates a cliff. A tax-free bucket helps you avoid stepping off that cliff by accident. But that is not the case. In fact, it is the wealthy who tend to skip right over it. So who actually gets hit it is not the couple with $70,000 in a pension, a six-figure RMD, $3 million or more in account with high steady income. Those households already have 85% of their Social Security taxed. So there is no phase in left to trigger their marginal rate. Is simply wherever they're sitting, they've moved right past the tax tornado. The real impact lands on the disciplined savers. These are the people who have saved consistently for decades, spent modestly built $1 to $2 million, mainly inside traditional 401ks and IRAs. They do not have big pensions, and they rely on a mix of Social Security and IRA withdrawals. If you understand the incentives, you can make better decisions. If you do nothing, the IRS will still have a plan for you. The only question is whether that plan matches your life. Their income usually falls in the range of $40,000 to $120,000. which just so happens to be the Social Security taxation phase-in zone. This is where the tornado hits with full force. In this range, Social Security moves through. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. This subject is not glamorous, but it is valuable. Small improvements in after-tax cash flow can compound into a better life, the same way small savings compound into wealth. Most people focus on how much they will withdraw. The more important question is what those withdrawals do to everything else tied to taxable income. If you wait until RMDs start, you may be forced into a higher bracket. At the same time, Social Security is phasing in. 3 stages from being not taxable to up to 50% is taxable to up to 85% is taxable. And every extra dollar pulled from a traditional 401k or IRA pulls more Social Security into taxation. That is why $1 can be taxed as if it is $1.50 or $1.85. I prefer to pay a known cost today rather than an unknown cost later. Conversions can be that choice when they are done within a deliberate plan. A good retirement is less about peak returns and more about steady, predictable after-tax cash flow. It is exactly how someone who believes they're in the 12% bracket ends up paying about 27.75%, or someone who believes they're in the 22% bracket is near 46.25%. I care about incentives because incentives explain behavior. The simplest way to lose control is to let every dollar of retirement spending come from the same taxable source. Of course, they never see a 27% or a 46% bracket, but they feel it when the tax code hits those same dollars twice. So who doesn't feel the tax tornado? Well, it is really anyone whose income is already high enough that their Social Security is already fully taxed at 85%. This is going to include retirees with large pensions, retirees with very large RMDs, and retirees with high investment income for them. There is nothing left to phase, and every additional dollar is simply taxed at their rate. They've skipped right over the tax tornado. Retirement is supposed to buy freedom. A single pre-tax bucket can quietly reduce that freedom by forcing income when you do not want it. This is why I respect planning that is boring. Boring planning is usually durable planning. So in other words, it is the middle income retiree who has moderate RMDs, maybe $30,000 to $80,000, receives $20,000 to $70,000 in Social Security, doesn't have a large pension to push. Social Security, fully taxable, has income low enough that Social Security is still phasing in and has built their nest egg through consistent saving, not high earnings. In other words, it is teachers, nurses, engineers, federal employees. The conversion window is not about being clever. It is about using the quiet years before mandatory withdrawals begin. Quiet years are where good planning happens. Small business professionals, mid-level managers, and everyday savers with $1 to $1.5 million in retirement accounts. They're responsible. They did everything right. They were disciplined savers. And they're the ones who get hit with the tax tornado. Now let me be very clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with saving in a traditional 401k or IRA. For many people it is. That tax deduction that makes saving possible in the first place. A big account statement can be comforting. But comfort comes from understanding the rules, not from ignoring them. But decades of retirement research all point to the same conclusion for many workers, especially those whose income grows over time. Adding Roth into the mix early in your career can dramatically improve your long-term tax picture. Here is why the Roth can be so powerful. Lower lifetime taxes. You pay taxes when you are younger. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. Most savers measure success by the size of the balance. In retirement, the more practical measure is how much spendable income you can control after taxes. And often in lower tax brackets, and then you avoid paying taxes when your income's higher, when RMDs are at play, or when Social Security is there. Fewer RMD problems. Roth accounts have no RMDs, which means you are not forced to take money out at any point. And when the money comes out, it is not even looked at as ordinary income. it comes out completely tax-free. So it doesn't influence whether you are hit with an IRMAA surcharge. It doesn't influence how much of your Social Security is taxed. You get to use this bucket freely. Lower Medicare's premiums, Medicare premiums, increase if your income crosses certain thresholds. Roth withdrawals do not count as taxable income, which keeps your Medicare costs lower, more control over your retirement income. Traditional accounts tell you when and how much you have to withdraw. Roth accounts do not do that. You can decide to pull money out and spend it. You can decide to let it grow. You can use it as a buffer, giving you tax-free income when you do not want a high-income year on record. You can save it for future healthcare costs. You can leave it to your heirs tax-free. Roth is flexibility, better after-tax wealth. I have watched Morningstar's analysis routinely show those that use a Roth early in life and then strategically use Roth conversions later end up with more spendable income in retirement and a lower lifetime total tax bill. The core idea is simple. When you pay, tax matters just as much as how much tax you pay. If you pay taxes when you are younger and in lower tax brackets, you avoid having to pay them later on in retirement when you have more avenues to worry about when RMDs may push you into higher brackets. The conversion window is valuable because it is one of the few times adults see a meaningful drop in taxable income by design, when more of your Social Security could become taxable when it might trigger IRMAA. When you have fewer tax planning years left, you are not just saving money, you are avoiding a forced tax bill when you want it the least in your 70s and in your 80s. And this brings us to one of the most important opportunities in all of retirement tax planning: Roth conversion windows. Because even if you spent the vast majority of your career contributing to a traditional 401k, like most Americans, there are still powerful ways to reshape your future tax bill. I have watched Morningstar's research is clear on this. The years between retirement and your early 70s are one of the most valuable tax planning windows you will ever have. People love clean categories like 12% or 22%. Retirement taxes are messier. The effective marginal rate can feel much higher because more than one formula is reacting to the same dollar. Why? Because your income tends to dramatically drop once you step away from the workforce. Your paycheck stops. Maybe you haven't yet decided to claim Social Security. If you understand the incentives, you can make better decisions, and RMDs haven't started yet. This creates a rare period 5, the 10th of May, be 12 years, where your tax bracket is the lowest it will ever be again. I prefer decisions that still look good 10 years from now. In investing, behavior matters as much as math. And this is where a Roth conversion can be incredibly powerful. Rather than waiting for RMDs to kick in at 73 or 75, you take advantage of this period where you are in lower tax brackets and you move money from your traditional. The tax code is full of phase-ins and cliffs. The problem is that two different rules can collide in the same year. Into a Roth and you pay taxes at a lower rate. This is exactly how retirees shrink their future. RMDs reduce the tax tornado, avoid IRMAA surcharges. I prefer decisions that still look good 10 years from now and lower their lifetime tax bill by tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Roth conversions let you take control of your tax destiny rather than letting the tax code do it for you. The key is to understand when a good plan is the one you can follow for decades without regret. Windows of opportunity open up earlier. We saw how a tax tornado unfolded for a couple with $1.5 million in a traditional IRA. Let's look at what could have happened, the version Morningstar's research often highlights. Because the tax problem we walked through wasn't unavoidable, it was predictable, it was preventable. If they had used a bit of Roth earlier, even directing a portion of their contributions into a Roth in lower earning years early in their career. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. They would have reduced the size of the IRA that had later grown into a tax problem. Small Roth contributions early means smaller, forced withdrawals. Later, or if they had blended pre-tax and Roth savings, they would enter retirement with flexibility. Instead, I prefer decisions that still look good 10 years from now. Of everything sitting in a single tax bucket with multiple account types, they could choose how much taxable income they want to take every year, rather than having the IRS choose for them. If they had done modest Roth conversions in their 60s, compounding works best when you remove unnecessary friction. In my mind, the goal of planning is to turn emergencies into routine decisions. If you plan the buckets early, the RMD years become routine, not frantic. This is the biggest opportunity. Most retirees miss the years between retirement and RMD age before Social Security starts, are often the lowest tax years for someone's adult life, even converting $20,000 to $40,000. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. A year in this window has an impact. It shrinks the future IRA balance. It reduces RMDs. It keeps more Social Security tax-free. It lowers the chance of triggering IRMAA and dramatically cuts the lifetime tax bill. Roth conversions between retirement and RMD age often reduce lifetime tax bills by 6 figures. So let's compare what could have happened with our retiree. From the example, the reality today is that their IRA went from $1.5 million to around $2 million at RMD age. Their RMD is now $80,000 to $90,000 or more. 85% of their Social Security becomes taxable. Higher brackets. IRMAA may kick in. Lifetime taxes compound year after year. But what if they had followed a bit of a Roth path? The IRA would be much smaller by the time they're 73. Their RMDs could be substantially lower. Maybe they're in the ballpark of $40,000 or $50,000, far less of their Social Security would be pulled into taxation. They would have lower Medicare premiums, and their lifetime tax bill would be dramatically reduced. The difference is not just about taxes, it is also about control. The Roth account allows you to decide when. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. To take out and how much to take out, and control which bracket you end up in. When you have just a traditional, that control is really out of your hands. So if you are in your 30s, your 40s, or your 50s, and you are consistently saving, and you are looking at accounts, traditional accounts, that are on track to grow to 1 million or 2 million or 3 million, the research is clear. Do not enter retirement with all of your wealth in traditional accounts. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. It might feel tax efficient. Now you capture that deduction, your take-home pay looks higher. It looks great on paper. I prefer decisions that still look good 10 years from now. A good plan is the one you can follow for decades without regret. But later in life, that efficiency could flip and become one of the biggest tax problems you'll ever face. A balanced approach, Roth, traditional and taxable, gives you options. It gives you the ability to manage when and how you realize income. If you understand the rules, you can make the math work for you. The goal is not a bigger number on a statement. The goal is control. It allows you to control what bracket you end up in, and ultimately, it makes your retirement safer, more flexible, and far more predictable. The goal is not just to save money, it is to save money in the right places. So your future self has choices. You work too hard to build up your accounts, to have the IRS dictate them. Entirely, the goal is not to retire with a big number, it is to retire with control. And the sooner you start building multiple buckets, the more you are going to have control over your planning and control over your retirement. I do have a video that goes over the ideal mix of accounts you want to go into retirement with, and I will link that here if you want to check it out. Compounding works best when you remove unnecessary friction. I also have a video going over Roth conversions and how to decide if it is the right move for you. I'll link that one as well. Compounding works best when you remove unnecessary friction. Let me know your thoughts. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please